All right. Welcome, everybody, to Cracking the Rich Code. I'm your host, Pete Beskus, and with me is one of our authors from Volume 13, Dr. Ryan Lombardo. Ryan, welcome to the program.
Thanks so much. Very nice to meet you, Pete.
Nice to see you too. And you're one of our newest authors. We just released Volume 13, yet another bestseller, international bestseller. This is number 13 in a row. I think the streak has continued. Your chapter is called, which was your chapter called again?
The power of health optimization.
The Power of Health Optimization. So tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what you do.
All right. So my name is Ryan Lombardo. I am a functional medicine physician. I focus primarily in the areas of um, metabolic disease, nutrition, hormones, weight loss, all the things that kind of encompass longevity and aging gracefully.
Nice. So I think that's a topic everybody is interested in, especially these days with the idea of longevity versus just growing old. Because
Right.
I know for me, that's like the biggest fear. Isn't that I'm going to grow old, is that I'm going to grow old and decrepit. So
Yeah, I think that's a real thing. And it's what we watched, it's what we grew up watching.
yeah, well, it's funny you say this because I was just talking about this with my sister yesterday, where I made the comment that my grandmother looked the same at 50 as she did at 100.
Oh,
Like there
wow.
was really no difference in how she looked. But it just goes to speak that at 50 she looked really old and at 100 she looked really good, right? So tell us a little
Yeah.
bit about, your perspective about longevity and how, you kind of address this issue.
Well, um, regarding what you were just saying before, it's interesting because there's actually been, and maybe it's just because of the things I look at on social media, but I've been kind of seeing a lot of Instagram reels, specifically of celebrities from our youth anyway, of people like Wilford Brimley and the Golden Girls and their ages
Yeah.
around 50 years old while they were at the height of their fame, yet they looked like they were 75, 80 years old. I mean, I'm almost 50, right? So I look at that and I look at what they looked like at that time, and it's fascinating. Granted, they did kind of look the same for the next 30 years or so, but it is kind of interesting just watching this generation, our generation, age differently, and kind of defy the odds of what we saw, that we should be slowing down. We've reached middle age. We should, be considering or looking at what retirement's going to be like, and kind of preparing for this next stage of life. None of us want to do that. We're all kicking and screaming, saying, "No way! We're fit, we're healthy, we have so much that we want to do." And whether that is truly a generational thing or it's just kind of a sign of the times of advancements in technology and medicine and everything else, I'm not sure. My perspective is more that this kind of Gen X population, those of us, born in the 70s, late 60s, we were kind of rebellious in a way anyway. We didn't want the 9 to 5 work life that our parents had. We didn't really subscribe to the whole idea of put on a suit every day, go to work, and come home. We didn't subscribe when we were kids. We don't really subscribe to it now. And I think part of that is what's helping us um, kind of look for ways to enjoy our life now the same way we did 20 years ago or 30 years ago, and how we want to enjoy our lives 20 and 30 years from now. I mean, put it this way, healthcare technology, medical technology is going to increase. It's going to increase much more rapidly now than it did over the last 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's an exponential improvement with, especially now with things like AI and other advancements. So honestly, I think there's going to be a large population of us that are going to live longer than even we want to if we're forced to stay alive even though we're unhealthy. So I think, to really answer your question, if we don't do something now to optimize our health, improve our function, and set ourselves up to age gracefully, appropriately, and with vitality, we're going to be in a world of trouble when we can't do the things we want to do at 80, but we're also not necessarily dying.
You know that, and I think that's a scary proposition. And it's funny because you mentioned like the comparison to the actors. I saw a thing that I'm the same age as Carol O'Connor was in Archie Bunker. Like
Yeah, that's
anybody out
crazy.
there who knows what Archie Bunker is, right? Like he looked ancient, right? And I'm the same age as him, right? So it's ridiculous. And it is funny because I think to your point, generationally, um, we're raging against that idea that I'm just going to grow old, sit on my rocker and on the like, no, no way. And I'm inspired by those 80-year-olds who are still killing it, who are still out there, who are still relevant, and have something to share. And that's who I want to be. So it's interesting that we all now, I think a lot of us, as we're approaching 50 or past 50, are looking at this vitality. And I love that word that you use because it is vitality. I think it's even better than longevity because I want to be full of
Yeah,
energy.
I agree. There's always this, or has been since I entered this field 20 years ago already. When I entered this field of longevity medicine, the first group that I worked with, and that I did, my board certifications through, is called the A4M, which is the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. And these are physicians, medical doctors that started this society because they were kind of disgruntled, fed up with the way Western medicine was moving medicine long before even those days, those early days when the society was just building. Now it's huge. I mean, now there's something like 35, 40,000 members, and it's everything from providers like me through to celebrated surgeons. But at that time, the idea of anti-aging medicine was, they chose that because they were like, we're not just going for longevity. We're trying to reverse aging. Like we're
Mhm.
literally, that was what their original plan was. And then it kind of got away and it became like age management. And there's even a group called that, AMMG, the Age Management Medicine Group. And they're large too, and they're kind of like that complementary, or even in some ways competing society of anti-aging longevity medicine physicians. But it's this idea of extending healthy human lifespan that's really the key. It's the idea of extending that vitality, extending that interest, it's extending motivation. And I think that makes all of the difference. It's very, I would say it's very easy to take a bunch of medicine and live. That part is easy. You could do nothing, go to the doctors that you need in order for your body to stay alive, and just do your thing. But if you're looking to, enjoy your life and enjoy the successes that you've had and enjoy your family and enjoy activities and all that, it's different than just getting by.
Yeah. That's a question I wanted to really ask you about the difference between intervention, like medical intervention. So, the anti-aging operations, right?
Yeah,
Versus what you do in your practice and a lifestyle change. Because the quick and dirty and easy is let's go get some pills, let's go get some surgery. Boom. I just shaved 10 years off of me.
right.
Versus, so how do you
Right.
approach that dichotomy?
You know, there is a absolute need for medicine and surgery. That's the first thing I'd have to say. And I respect it immensely. And I think that for the most part, it's probably the end all and be all of improving healthcare worldwide. The issue is it's become such a large business, and it's so difficult to cater to the masses when it comes to healthcare that it just doesn't work. It's like um, we know that specific things work better for specific people, and finding that out except through trial and error is very difficult to do. My practice is really that practice, and I'm sure there are practices like this all over the country, if not the world, where when you've either exhausted every possibility, you've been to all of your doctors, you've been to your specialists, and you've said, and they keep telling you everything's normal, get used to it. I don't, there's really nothing wrong. You're you know, a menopausal woman, you should expect to, feel these symptoms. Well, you're 55 years old. You've been working for 30 years. Your knee should hurt. Your body is just, slowing down. You're not 30 years old anymore. You shouldn't be hitting the gym as hard as you were. The people, male or female, are going to hear these kinds of things.
Yeah, like
Um,
I permission to let up, right? Because I got told that this year with my knees
yeah,
that, you're just in a state of decline. This is now just pain management. I'm like,
yeah.
okay, that's not a great thing to hear from anybody. Is that, like how you felt today is the best you're gonna feel to like,
It's so funny. The first time I ever heard it, I had my one of my early wellness centers. One of my patients came to me, a DO, medical doc, an osteopath, came to me for some things, and I was a little ginger walking into the room, and I'd seen him a few times already, and we kind of become friendly, referring some patients back and forth, and he's like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, I don't know. I woke up today and took a weird step, and all of a sudden I felt this really sharp pain in my heel. And he's like, "Why don't you take off your shoe?" I'm like, "No, no, no, we're here for you today. Don't worry." And he's like, "No, no, just do it." So I do, pushes real hard, and I kind of yell. And he's like, "Yeah, that's what I thought. You've got bursitis." I'm like, "From what?" I'm just doing my normal stuff. And he's like, "Welcome to your mid-30s, my friend." He's like, "This is just what life is." And I refuse to accept that. It may even be true. It doesn't mean I'm going to accept it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to find ways to prevent that. And there are. I mean, there's certain types of movement exercises. There's ways to keep joints lubricated. There's ways to sleep. It turns out, in my specific case, it's likely because I sleep with my toes pointed, and Angela's sleeping on my stomach a lot. So you
Mhm.
do that, you shorten your Achilles, then you go to take that first step, you stretch it out a little bit, presses on the bursa sac, you get some pain. Well, that function and understanding that anatomic response, it did, encouraged me to, all right, I'm going to try sleeping on my back. Since then, I sleep on my back. End of story. I was able to train myself to do it, went away. And it's so, are you willing to make those changes? Now, that's what I consider a simple change. People with sleep issues, that is not a simple change.
Mhm.
People with a large belly, that's not a simple change. The pressure that you get on your back, there's all sorts of things that you can kind of throw wrenches into the storyline and say, well, it sounds simple for you, but for me, it's different. And I would say 100% for you, it's different. For everybody, it's different. And that's really the difference in my practice. Every single time I'm working with someone, it's like the study of one. Even if I'm running labs, I'm not running labs to see if anything's abnormal. I'm running labs to see what their entire pattern looks like. So when I'm looking at labs, I'm not just skipping over things because they're not marked as high or low. I'm looking at it collectively as a deeper metabolic panel, a deeper micronutrient panel, a deeper food sensitivity panel, a deeper hormone panel. I want to see the ratios. I want to see how everything lines up, because that tells me a lot more about how they're functioning than just if something's wrong. Because
Well,
I
that
could
makes a
generally,
lot of sense.
right?
Yeah.
You could generally tell a story about who the person is, how they feel at various times throughout the day, when they eat, what their parents' medical history may have been, just from looking at this. If you take that approach, and that changes the entire dialogue with the patient, because this is about them. It's validating the way that they feel, and that's, I think, what's missing the most is people are kind of, I don't want to say they're dismissed, but they are, unless something's so easy to pinpoint as wrong and has an intervention. Because sometimes if there's no medicine for it and there's no fix for it, then they're dismissed just because of that.
Hmm.
And they're just told, they give them a diagnosis. Well, there's not really much you can do. Things like fibromyalgia, it's easy to pick on, right? Well, when the name of the disease or the name of the diagnosis essentially is the meaning of the description of the symptoms that the patients just gave you, that's not helpful. Like
Yeah.
me having a name for something, if I,
You you
if
just
then it
labeled it,
changes my
but
experience.
yeah, you're like, oh, see. And it's funny because I kind of I use the knee analogy. I remember when I was this last year, I had big time knee problems, and my orthopedic guy was like, well, we could do surgery now, or And I'm like, what's the or? He's like, well, you're getting older. There's arthritis. It's kind of what it is. And I'm like, well, how about if I just lose 20 pounds first and then we see? And he's like, yeah, you could do that, right? Like you could do that.
Yeah.
So it's like that simple, because I think most people don't want to hear the simple, first
Oh, for
steps.
sure.
Um,
Well, now regarding your knee, there's major advancements in things like PRP and the platelet-rich plasma and other type of biostimulators to encourage your body to heal, specifically in that area. There are peptides like BPC 157. This is a peptide that's been used forever in athletics. It helps heal soft tissue. It also works incredibly well to heal the gut if taken orally. I mean, there's stuff out there that just works
yeah,
and works really well. And if you are, if you have the ability to have a conversation with someone who does this, it will be a much more eye-opening experience than just being told, you're getting older, get used to it. It's not going to get any
yeah.
better.
We're not going to treat you because you're not an Olympian or you don't
Yeah,
play for the Rams. Like,
right,
sorry, it's not going to happen, right? I
right.
get you. So I know you kind of talked about everything's an individual, but I'm not going to go there. I'm going to ask you, okay, in your practice, in your experience, what are some of the top things that you seem to be as a common thread here?
Yeah. I mean, I would say the absolute top common thread in my kind of practice is weight management. I mean, I absolute. It's probably 50-50 if it was, or let's say 45-45, maybe 90% of my practice is kind of wrapped up in this idea of weight loss and maybe hormone optimization. And I think that's because it's the largest category of people that are being underserved. It's the people that are told, you know, that's just menopausal weight gain, that, get used to it. Or, men in andropause, right? Where they stop producing as much testosterone as they did, just like it's, the male menopause, as a lot of people call it. Well, you start storing fat because of that. And you generally, it's lower belly, love handle, sometimes upper belly. There's other reasons for it, but at the same time, it heavily correlates to this change in hormones. When we see that, men and or women, men are told, it's stress, you're drinking too much, you're probably, not eating right, just eat better and exercise.
Mhm.
That's what men are told. Women are told something totally different. Well, what did your mom look like?
Yeah,
We've had a couple of kids. I mean, that's just what it is. And I'm fascinated by those kinds of conversations and wondering, well, where does the physician think this relationship is going to go with the patient at this point? You're telling them to accept the things that they're disappointed in or confused about or frustrated with, and they're looking for answers, and you're being told to leave it alone. And from my perspective, those are the things that my patients come to me most for, because they're like, look, I already eat right and exercise. I do everything I'm supposed to do. Like
yeah,
I'm in the gym multiple times a week. I bike, I run, I play tennis, I play paddle, whatever. I try to avoid carbohydrates. Sure, I'll have, a cocktail with some friends, or, I might have a slice of pizza here and there, but I'm good.
yeah,
This is what I'm hearing from people. I'm not hearing from people who are, eating ho-hos and Twinkies and loading up on burgers and fries every night and then complaining to me that they can't lose weight. I mean, they know. Those people, they come in, they're not going to tell me that they're clean eating. If they're not, it's a waste of their time. Right. So I don't know. I'm not anti junk food either. I think there's a place for everything. I just find that the people that know what they're doing wrong change it before they come in front of me and say, "Hey, I need help."
yeah. And
And
that's kind of like the whole thing, is that they are doing the right things,
yeah,
frustrated, and they're not getting any direction or actionable steps in the traditional methods.
exactly. And so when they go to their traditional doctor, if they push a little bit harder, the doctor's willing to run their kind of like their annual physical stuff,
Mhm.
your CBC and comp panel, like the typical blood test you run when you're going to the doctor once a year. They might run your lipids, cholesterol, because that can matter in some ways, and then they might run one of those thyroid markers called TSH that seems to tell them, well, your thyroid's fine, so we don't think it's anything that is you. It's just probably your diet or exercise. And I, all functional medicine providers, not just me, but we don't see it that way. We look at it as, all right, well, that's not enough because there's other things going on. There's other things to look at. So what I like looking at, I will look at specific nutrient deficiencies that correlate to how your body makes energy. I'll look at metabolic panels that include glucose and insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity and byproducts of fat metabolism to see, all right, is your body using fat for energy or is it storing fat, trying to preserve energy for the future? I'll look at the hormones and make sure that they're appropriately, quote unquote, balanced, right?
Hmm.
Meaning, are they in line with how your body kind of should function or is presenting, or are they not in line that way? And therefore, this tells me a different story. We might have to make some other decisions. And I'm not saying we have to treat where we shouldn't treat. I'm saying let's take a look at a whole picture because if you're doing everything right and the labs that your internist ordered tell you everything's fine, that's great. Because what that means is we don't need a specialist that like an oncologist or a nephrologist, kidney specialist, or a liver specialist, right? Like all that stuff is working. That's excellent. Now let's focus on metabolic health and functional health, which is what I do.
Hmm.
Now because that might be the issue. There may be some things that are underlying that are the normal course of aging, and specifically in your, genetic predisposition, they've been turned on in whatever way. But normal doesn't have to be that way. Normal doesn't have to present with all of those symptoms. Normal doesn't have to be that difficult to optimize your body comp, your energy level, your sleep, whatever it is. We can create a new normal that's the way you want to feel. It just may be making some changes, some lifestyle changes, some dietary changes, maybe some supplements, maybe some peptides, maybe some prescriptions. It depends. Um, I have a large percentage of patients that where we're doing chronic food sensitivity panels
Hmm.
because they are eating so clean and they're doing all these other things so right, but they've developed these chronic sensitivities to foods creating inflammation, and these aren't even unhealthy foods. I mean, this is like, you know, it's not always, like I said, the starch. Or many cases, it's vegetables and fruits and lean proteins and healthy fats and all the things that you think are healthy. Everyone's made up a little bit differently. And if you're predisposed to have some kind of um, IBS or malabsorption syndrome or autoimmune condition, which are incredibly prevalent, especially these days, well, there's a good likelihood that you're going to also have these chronic inflammatory reactions to these other things that you're continually ingesting, even when they're supposedly healthy. And so I look at that. If we have to go that deep, which we do often, we start identifying, all right, well, we're going to create an anti-inflammatory diet that is specific to you. And we're going to be replacing nutrients that are specific to you. And we're going to optimize your hormonal balance specific to you. And all of a sudden, it's not just that the symptoms start going away, it's that they start feeling so well. They're like, I didn't even realize those other three things were symptoms. I've always felt that way. I had no idea that I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting byproduct of anybody who's done like a health change for the positive. It's like, oh, I didn't know I could feel this way.
Yeah.
I stopped drinking this year, and for the first time, I was like, wow, like
Yeah.
this this is how you feel in the mornings. This is how you feel, 3, 4, 5, 7 days into something. The recovery. Wow, I feel so much better the next day. So it's interesting that if it's so ingrained in our day to day, how moving one thing out of it that's holding us back, you're like, oh, I can't see myself doing that now because that was horrible.
Absolutely.
So
I
you're kind of mentioning supplements, things like that. Like, what are some of the biggest deficiencies you see in people, like when they're low in something?
The most common deficiencies I see are things like B12, vitamin B12, folate, um, CoQ10, coenzyme Q10. It's really the nutrient, certainly vitamin D.
Hmm.
fatty acids, omega-3 index. Those are the most common deficiencies I see, and it's not surprising. I mean, the fatty acids, our diet in the U.S. is especially, I'm in the Midwest, right? So we are not getting the greatest source of fatty acids here. I mean, we're not coastal fish eaters. We're certainly not eating the way our ancestors did. My grandparents are from Italy, so it's different. I mean, living on fish, fresh olive oil, it's just different than
Hmm.
what we get here. And even if we were to say, all right, well, but you could eat paleo, you could a lot of nuts and seeds, and you could get what you want, but the amount of that you would have to eat, the frequency, the and the quality would have to be so good. But to in reality, I'm looking at these labs and I'm seeing it over and over and over again. Those are the things in the red. Now the B vitamin deficiencies, especially B12 and folate, B6, that goes into a little bit more science. It's called methylation and MTHFR, which is very kind of popular gene test to look at in today's functional medicine world, longevity medicine. And it's a huge percentage of the population that has this gene variant. Um, Therefore, people are deficient. Basically means they have difficulty converting inactive nutrients into the active form. And
Okay.
so in some cases, their whole blood level may show up that this nutrient is there, but their body's not using it.
Hmm.
The tests I run kind of show more of a functional deficiency, so I can see both, whether it's kind of like masking the deficiency, and that happens all the time. Same thing happens in hormones, really. You can test for blood levels and free levels, let's say. And just because the total number looks a certain way, the free level may be deficient. We see that in thyroid, we see that in testosterone. It's very common. Um, Probably um, the most efficient nutrient and hormone that people feel, I would say, is probably B12.
Okay.
CoQ10 close second because it has a lot to do with cellular energy and actual the way you feel, if you feel energized or not. But then DHEA, which is a precursor hormone your adrenal glands make, encouraging your body to make other hormones. And the way we live, how we're so stressed, we're always on the go, we're stressed about missing a phone call, being late to work, or we haven't checked email in an hour, and I always get 100 emails at this time.
Yeah,
We're
the
stressed
micro
about that.
stressors every day, the
Yeah,
notification bings.
right. And that's not, we're stressed about things that we're like not designed to be stressed about. And the hormone producing glands get affected by that, especially the adrenal glands. So when people talk about adrenal fatigue or adrenal insufficiency, um, it makes perfect sense that now that feedback loop is off,
Hmm.
and we need to fix that. Our bodies were designed for a stress response that was for very scary situations, right? It, Being scared that you are late for a meeting and freaked out about it, and you've got this deadline to turn in a paper at school or whatever it is, that's not what we're designed for.
Yeah.
And that kind of response is so ingrained in us. We see it from friends, we see it from family, we see it
I see it in
on,
children, right? Like
yeah,
our children have been raised that way with trying to get to school on time, or you get a tardy slip, which,
yeah.
is like,
Well, and then
why am I
everybody,
stressing out my 8-year-old?
but then everyone's freaked out about it. Then the parents are freaked out because they're making their kid late, and then by them trying to rush, they're going to be late to work, and so everybody is just like on edge.
Yeah.
And And so we blow through certain hormones, we blow through certain nutrients, and all of a sudden our body's like trying to do everything it can to comfort itself. So we start overproducing these steroid hormones, and then we start storing fat, and then
Yeah.
we're tired, and so we reach for food that can make us feel better quickly.
Yeah.
And then we have food coma sitting on the couch. We feel better. All of a sudden, serotonin and dopamine's flooding our brains, and we just ate half a bag of pretzels and a bowl of ice cream, and yeah, we feel great.
Until half hour later when we're beating ourselves up, right?
Yeah,
Mentally.
Right.
So I would take this to pivot a little bit to speak like, is this what you kind of talked about in your chapter in the book?
Yeah, in the beginning, so my conversations with Jim Brett, the publisher, early on, when we were talking about doing this, it was, this whole idea of cracking the rich code, right? And it was like, all right, well, what is that kind of definition of success? Well, in my world, success is feeling better, functioning better, and being able to participate in the things that you want to participate in, and feeling great about doing it, right? Not
Mhm.
feeling like you had to force yourself or drag yourself and then be tired or in pain afterwards or whatever it is. So what I talked about in the beginning was really, there are different at different stages of life, there are different measures of success. When you're a kid, like you're saying, the success is like just being excited to do things and play at recess and get answers right on your tests, right? And then you get into that adolescence, and success is a little bit different. It's having this specific group of friends and the right
Being
clothes,
popular.
and yeah, and and being good in sports or whatever. You get a little bit older, it's like, all right, you're college, you're out of college, you're in your first job, and you're realizing, all right, I've got to perform. I want to do well here because I'm interested in what I'm doing. This is finally like something, that I'm doing. Or you're not interested in what you're doing, and success is finding that and being able to excel and advance into doing those things. But then things change. Then all of a sudden it's, am I making enough money?
Mhm.
Am I supporting my family? Do I have a way out of this? And and that change is really what I've seen sparks also the change in taking care of yourself, and 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 noticing the changes in your body, your mind, and not waiting from that 25, 30-year old, I can persevere through anything, to all of a sudden you're 50 and you're wondering what happened and what
Mhm.
happened. And um, I lost my dad last year, and watched him during those years that I was, alive for, whatever. Watched him through those years up to about age 50, where that's what he did. Rat race, built a huge company, and all of a sudden he is fatigued, overweight, not feeling well, diagnosed with metabolic disease, peripheral artery disease. I mean, I could go on and on. At 50, right? I mean, it was crazy. But it was a different time, different era, and I I didn't want that. I knew I didn't want that then,
Mhm.
and I just kind of decided to dive in deeper into like how the body works. And at first, I was focused on more like the psychology of making the choices that people make. And so that's what I did. I majored in psychology in college, and but I had always been an athlete. I'd always been interested in optimizing like the way I could function and feel, because I'm not a big guy. I'm a smaller person, but I played football and I had to compete with guys that were way bigger than me. Luckily, I was fast, so I was able to, do what
Outrun
I
them.
needed to do.
If you can't hit
But
them, outrun them.
right, but I didn't want to get hurt either, right? So I'm in the gym, I'm drinking Gainer's fuel and trying to eat, as many calories as I could. And I'm like, all right, well, how do you sustain that? Well, you can't unless you're sustaining that level of activity or sustaining that age, right? Stay below
Yeah.
18 years old and you'll be able to burn whatever you can eat. But that's not going to happen. So, um, anyway, I kind of watched my dad's health decline during that time, um, and he left the company he was with, and he had grown it from very small to very large. He left and um, literally was rewarded with a watch. The company sold for a couple $100 million, and my dad got a watch. He was the number two person in the company and had been for 18 years or whatever. And meanwhile, he missed a lot of stuff with us. I'm one of five kids. He missed a lot of stuff with us, and he also kind of lost sense of himself and was sick.
Mhm.
And, not even a few years later, he was, having his carotid arteries cleaned out, and he had changed his diet completely, and he was on a couple of different medications, and he was just generally unhealthy, developing, diagnosed type 2 diabetes, and had to deal with that. And I can just go on and on. I'm like, this is an intelligent person, a former corpsman in the Navy, MBA from DePaul. Like, this is a smart dude. And and it happened to him, just like it happens to, millions and millions of other people, just because they're focused on other things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
and
being unhealthy doesn't make you dumb. It doesn't make you less than. It's part of the process of what you sacrifice to go do something else.
Absolutely. And so I touch on that kind of part of my life where I'm like, something needs to change. There has to be a reason, a catalyst to make these changes. And then the rest of the chapter are simple things that may require some assistance from a professional like me, or it may be something that you can kind of dive into on your own. Things like nutritional optimization, supplementation if there are deficiencies, where I would say, don't just guess, go find someone that can run these tests.
Yeah.
It's crazy to guess. You go to, you go to Walgreens or any, pharmacy, and you pick something off the shelf. Well, just because you read that it might be good for you doesn't mean it's good for you. Doesn't mean
Yeah.
it's the right thing, and doesn't mean it's the right version. And so I'm like, find out, talk to a professional so you know. And there's other things. There's meditation, there's exercise, there's specifically hormone optimization. Yeah, you always will need a professional for that. But it's those things that we don't necessarily pay attention to that are likely the reasons we don't feel well or feel the way we want to. And they are all things that we'd actually have to take a little step away from daily normal life in order to do something about. You may have to make some changes, but those changes are going to be incredibly rewarding. It's not the same thing as just finding out you have high cholesterol and taking medicine for it.
Yeah. But let's be honest, Ryan. Let's be honest. I think the fundamentals everybody knows, right? It's don't drink, lose weight, don't eat so much, don't eat sugar, get off your butt for, at least an hour
Absolutely.
a day, right? Like we all know this, right? From the smartest person, from the like how many obese doctors do we know? How many unhealthy, health practitioners do we know? Even fitness people, right? You see them all the time.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're working with your clients and just the general public, you can run all the labs you want, right?
Yep.
It's just data.
Yep.
The solution isn't data, it's what's going on up here.
Yep.
So how do you crack that? Because that's the rich code right there, right?
Yeah. So what you just said from the beginning to the end is why I struggled to even write this chapter and to even say, yeah, I'll do it. And it's because everyone knows. Like I said before, like, if you're not eating well,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I don't want to attribute, I don't want people feeling guilty about what they're eating. There's nothing to do with that. That's not what guilt is for. Guilt should be reserved for some things that you're doing wrong. And
Yeah, it should be directed from your mother,
yeah,
right? Or
yeah,
grandmother,
exactly.
right?
Exactly.
Specific
Very different.
times.
Right. It should not be because you decided to have dessert with dinner. Like, that isn't it. Your mind is what's going to make all of the difference in you either being fed up with the way you feel or opening it up to understanding that what we were told, what we were taught, what very prestigious Western physicians, even traditional medicine, was taught and it was teaching. All of that's changed. No one realizes it because their doctors are still practicing the way they practiced for 20, 30 years because they don't have to change it.
Yeah. I also
But
see one thing different with the traditional old school medicine versus practitioners that are coming up forward. It's the support aspect. It's like you kind of mentioned earlier. People go to the doctor and say, I have this problem, and they're like, that's all you can do. And that's not what people want. People want support through this difficult transition. So how do you, when do you do the labs and you do all the tests and you're like, here, this is what's wrong with you. How do you support them through that change?
So the first thing I do, which I think is very different, and I've been told over and over again, I've never had a visit like this, is that I take the findings of these labs and present it to them line by line, like it's a biochem and biophysiology lesson on them. So they are learning about themselves in a way no one's ever said. Everyone else tells them, well, these are normal, this is fine, this one's off, here's this pill. It'd be very easy to do that, and I would be more efficient. But I don't know if I'd have the quality of patients I have. I certainly would have the quantity, but I don't know if I'd have the quality. And the when people understand how their body works, and they understand that you're looking at them differently, and that you're teaching them about them, and that they have someone to contact and reach out to while they're making these changes, it changes their motivation to do it because they're already motivated by the way they feel.
Yeah.
They're already motivated by the referral from their spouse or their sibling or their friend. They already have some motivation. But like you said, where's the follow through? And so one of the first things I tell them is that I'm not an out of sight, out of mind provider. We're not doing this visit today, and I'll see you in 6 months when we retest you. Sure, if that's what you want, we can do that. But you can message our practice. You could message me. You have questions. Like I'm asking you to change the way you eat. I'm asking you to change the way you sleep. I'm asking you to start meditating, to whatever, read 15 minutes, to take 6 pills of nutrients that you're clearly deficient in. You've never taken a pill in your life. I'm asking you to make some changes, but I don't want to hear from you for six
That's
months.
right.
Like,
Here you go. Here's the script. Get out of
yeah,
here. Right.
yeah. I mean, I just think that's nuts. Now, there's a huge element of psychology, of counseling that goes into this, right? And that's the part I think that I enjoy the most. The science and the data, it's fascinating to me. I mean, I like that a lot. And that is kind of, luckily for me, fun in between those visits because I get to look at this stuff. It's like figuring out a puzzle. But what I like the most is working with the clients and saying, all right, here's what we need to do. I want to know how you're feeling. I want to know what changes you feel, whether you think it's a side effect or you think it's a benefit. I still want to know because I want to know how we can optimize this. And it's one of those situations like, obviously, you're kind of working yourself out of a job because you're trying to make them feel so good that they don't need you. But in reality, them feeling so well and so much better than they did before more encourages a different kind of relationship. It encourages a give and take that I think it has been missing for so long in medicine, where you really get to know each other. And
Well, I see that 100%. Like I know the relationship that my folks had with their doctor and now it's just transactional, whereas in the past, it very much was a relationship. And I think you nailed it right there with creating a relationship with the people you're working with.
yeah, it's important. In healthcare, it's very important. But when you're talking about longevity medicine, it's so important
Yeah.
because you have to know more than, like you said, just what's on the paper.
Yeah.
You're working with this person who's alive and living and functioning in their daily life. That's what makes all the difference. It's their daily life. It's not the 30 minutes they're with me.
This has been awesome. I wanted to ask you a little bit about how did you get into the Rich Code group?
I, no joke. One day, I saw a message pop up from Jim Britt, and then a phone call 5 minutes later when I was like, "Yeah, I'd be interested to hear, to hear about this." And he called me. We were on the phone for probably an hour
Hmm.
and just exchanging stories. And I was literally saying, I don't think I'm your guy. I don't think I fit into this mix. I mean, these were, different types of entrepreneurs, business coaches, finance people. And he said, well, we've had physicians, we've had some people, your perspective, is different and it's unique, but I think this is the time for for what you do. This is the time. This is what people are interested in. Kind of like you said early on, this idea of vitality, people are like fascinated with this right now. And so I said, all right, let's do it. I write newsletters, I write articles. I've been doing that kind of stuff for a very long time. I've never really sat down to say, all right, well, how would I, if I've, few thousand words, and that's what I'm limited to.
Yeah.
What would I have to say? And I didn't know. I mean, that chapter changed so many times. I can only hope that there's enough info for people to be like, all right, I get this. There's some changes I can easily make if I actually want to feel better, if I actually want to, make these things. But like you said, the desire has to be there. The mindset is key.
Yeah, the commitment needs to be there. And I would recommend anyone who's listening right now, you can hear that what we cultivate, what Jim cultivates for Cracking the Rich Code is really a unique and diverse voices across the spectrum of what it means to be wealthy, what it means to be adding value, whether it's through finance or through health. And I encourage anyone who's listening who's interested. We are looking to fill up volume 15 right now. So if you're interested in Cracking the Rich Code, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn or at my email address, pete@vescusconsulting.com, or directly to Jim. You don't have to wait for him to come and tap on your shoulder. He's more than happy to have conversations with anyone who's wanting to be part of this amazing group. In addition to being an author in this best-selling series that is endorsed by Tony Robbins, you also get access to our mastermind. And I wanted to ask Ryan a little bit about your first impressions, and you've been to a couple of the masterminds from when you signed up. What are some of the things that have been a little interesting or surprising about our mastermind?
So the first one that I went to really solidified my not just interest in doing it, but it made me feel very comfortable in being with this group, right? I met some people that I just kind of resonated with, even via messaging while we're on in the chat message while we're in these groups. And it's, people come from all, varying backgrounds, from, very successful to, leaving a industry they've been with forever and starting something like their passion project, and finding success, and like, all right, how do I manage this, and what do I do, and how do I make a go of this. I found it motivating. I found great camaraderie. I actually, the last one I went to, someone's from a town like not even 30 miles away from me. And I'm like, oh, hey, when our books come out, let's order some, do joint book signing. And let's find some people, in the greater, 150-mile radius, and see if there's others that are interested, and we can, get a group together. Because it really, this whole thing is about encouraging each other's success and learning from each other. I would think that at least 80% of the people that have written chapters in any of these volumes would provide some or some great benefit to any number of other authors. Now, certainly there's that 20% where they might already be both like the exact experts, and they might just be great networkers together.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of us, we're experts in what we do, and we can't be jack of all trades, right? And so the opportunity to be speaking to some of these other people that have been selected or pursued this opportunity to be part of the group, I think is great. And now it's become, I was just talking to one of my admins the other day. I'm like, all right, every last Friday, every final Friday of the month, just block my schedule so I can at least be there, and if for whatever reason can't do it, I know it's on there and I see the reminders and it's coming through. So I don't personally schedule something in that space.
Yeah, I'm the same way too. And especially because, the best part is the networking and getting to know everybody, because everyone has fascinating stories and great insights. And, I'm a curious person, so I love to learn. But then
Yeah.
the other one, the component too that I love is all the guest speakers that come in, and they really do add to the richness of the community. We just had Dennis Waitley on for the second time, and he's 91 years old, and just to hear him say things like the best part of my life was between 65 and 85, which for me is kind of, that vitality, that rejuvenation, that idea that I want to be at 91 is vital, as much as vitality and energy as this man does. So, seeing those examples, reminding yourself of why you're there, I think really helps to keep the fire going inside.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I just wanted to end on that note. I want to thank you again, Ryan, for coming on the show and for sharing all this amazing information. I think it's such a great conversation with me today.
I loved it. Thanks for having me.
All right.
Appreciate it.
And like I said, if you want to catch his chapter on vitality and longevity, get it in volume 13. It's out now. It's an international bestseller already. And 14 is, getting close to being wrapped up, and we're sourcing for 15. So if you're an author or a coach or a speaker or somebody, a thought leader, somebody who wants to share a story, reach out to us for getting it to volume 15. Again, thanks everyone for watching Cracking the Rich Code, and we will see you all next